seems as though employees are finding whatever way they can to avoid having to stay in the office. Even employees who have been forced to go back in the office have found a creative way to avoid having to stay there the entire day, and it's called coffee badging.
Meet Mr. A. Every morning, Mr. A strolls into the office at 9 a.m., swiping his badge with perfect enthusiasm. He hits a few meetings, grabs coffee with colleagues, and keeps the daily buzz going. But here's the twist. Come noon, he sneaks out, heading home to wrap up his work in comfort. By around 5, he's clocked out. Mission accomplished. Mr. A has redefined the 9 to 5 in his own terms. And interestingly, this trend also has a name.
A new trend emerging in the back to office push, and that is coffee badging.
Coffee badging is two worlds colliding. It's employers wanting to get their workers back into the office, and employees' desire to really have more flexibility on the job. And so that's coming together in this trend of coffee badging.
Coffee badging is happening because workers are using this as a soft revolt against their return to office mandates that companies have put out. And
so the battle's getting a little bit feisty, I see. People are finding creative ways, as I mentioned, to not have to be in the office full time. Now, let's be honest, this is like another form of hybrid work. They're still going to the office, maybe instead of an 8-hour day at their desk in the office, instead they're going in, grabbing a coffee, sitting down for a couple hours, 3-4 hours, having a chat with a colleague and heading back home to finish their work. So essentially they're still doing 8 hours of work according to what it looks like. Instead of being there the whole day though, they're just being there for 4 hours. So, I mean, maybe if you already get hybrid where you work at and then you add this on top of your hybrid, now you get a double hybrid because now you get to go into the office, say 3 days a week, 2 days a week, and then you're only there for a half day each time. It's a battle of the employee versus the employer.
Just like badge in, have a coffee, check in with their colleagues, do some work, and then leave their office early.
Coffee badging was a term that Owl Labs coined as part of its 2023 State of Hybrid Work report. And what we found is that employees weren't necessarily returning to the office in a traditional 8 to 5 manner 5 days a week, but they were coffee badging. Some were going in just to show face, grab a cup of coffee, say hi to some of their colleagues, maybe their boss, so that they could check the box for their company's return to office mandate. Whereas others were going into the office for different periods of time, maybe for reasons that the office offered them luxuries that the home environment didn't, which is access to technology, which was meeting with colleagues or being in in-person meetings.
A lot of the workplace trends that...
Let's be honest, he said in-person meetings. I don't know about you all. I work in the office, and let me tell you something. Most of the meetings that we do can be done virtually. The same thing that we're doing in the office in person, we can do virtually. Most of the time, I don't really notice much of a benefit from being in person. Now, don't get me wrong. I do enjoy being around my colleagues in person, chit-chatting, the banter back and forth is great. You don't get that really when you're on Zoom as much. But let's be honest. Most of these times we're going into the office and we're doing things, especially if you're working an office job. If you're an administrative position, you go into the office, a lot of things you're doing in the office, you can do at home. So this is why they're having this silent revolt. Now, some work does lend itself to being more in person, and some work does lend itself to being at home. So when he mentioned, people going in the office for in-person meetings, how often does that really happen? A lot of times you go into the office and you're still doing the Zoom. I've seen this happen. You go into the office and you're in your office at work in the building, and you're on Zoom with other people around you on Zoom in their offices.
That we're seeing right now are very much reflective of what's happening in the overall job market.
The overall U.S. economy is performing well, but the job market is cooling. A closer look at the monthly job creation over the past 2 years reveals the broader trend, with the labor market adding just 227,000 jobs in November. Some experts note that workplace trends often mirror the job market. During the pandemic, when workers' demand was high, quiet quitting became the dominant workplace theme. But now, as the job market is tighter, particularly for white-collar jobs, coffee badging is trending.
Workplace trends reflect what's happened in the job market largely because you can tell who has the power. During COVID, the employees had the power. Employers were scared to death of losing employees, and it was a tight job market. And it was very difficult to get qualified employees in the door. These days, the employer has the power because even though the job market fundamentally is still good, it's not nearly as strong as it used to be. So employees can't job hop the way that they did 2 or 3 years ago. Now, from the perspective of the employer, it's, look, we gave you your time. Now it's our time. You're going to come back to the office, and if you don't like it, you can go elsewhere.
Dynamics that we saw in the labor force a couple of years ago were very unusual. The issue is that we had much fewer workers, and a lot of power had really shifted towards employees and away from employers in the workforce relationship. That's one of the reasons we saw quiet quitting, because there was just a lot of demand for workers and people weren't that worried about losing their jobs in that kind of an environment. Whereas,
so you ever wonder why they make it sound like it's such a contentious relationship? During COVID, employees had the power. Now that the job market's tightened, employers have the power. It's like, why does it have to be that way? Why can't it be a symbiotic relationship? Why is it this person or this corporation versus these people? And what was the problem with people working at home? Part of me wonders, so during the pandemic, when most people were working at home, or a lot of people anyways, was there that dramatic of a decrease in productivity to where employers just were chomping at the bit to get people back into the office? And as soon as the tide flipped and it became a tighter job market, they're saying, hey, get back into the office because productivity suffered? Or is it some other reason, such as maybe they overhired during the pandemic and they're using the return to the office mandate to have natural people quit, have natural attrition because people don't want to go back into the office, so they say, you know what, I'm going to quit. Now, where they're going, I'm not sure, because there are much fewer positions open that are fully remote. A lot more positions are hybrid now, which is a happy medium, but much fewer positions that are fully remote. So, but I just wonder why it has to be such a contentious thing.
now we have an environment that's much more balanced.
Productivity.
Productivity has long been a contentious issue for supporters and critics of remote work, with mixed results in studies measuring its impact. For instance, October 2024 research from the Bureau of Labor Statistics found that productivity increased with the rise of remote work across 61 private sector industries from 2019 to 2021. However, a major July 2023 study by Stanford's Institute for Economic Policy Research reported that fully remote work is linked to about 10% lower productivity than fully in-person work.
So studies are not clear on whether remote work makes you more or less productive. There is mixed evidence there, but there are perceptions that coming together can increase productivity.
The reason there's no clear answer on this one is because it's incredibly hard to measure how remote work is impacting productivity. So it really depends on the job. It depends on the skill and the task that you're trying to complete, what industry you're in, what kind of worker you are. That makes it incredibly hard to get an exact answer to, is remote work good or bad?
So she makes a really, really good point. It depends on the type of work that you do and the type of industry that you're in. Because let's say that you are a hardcore programmer and all you do all day is write code. Wouldn't you imagine you would benefit more from being in a quiet, secluded, even environment where you're not being distracted by the goings on in the office and you can just focus strictly on the program or the coding that you're writing versus let's say you are a manager or a supervisor. I can understand why you need to be in the office and you need to be available to help people that need your assistance or meet with the C-suite or whatever, what have you, because your work is different than that of a programmer. So I do think it is more job specific and industry specific than anything else, and not just the overall, we're completely remote, overall, we're completely back into the office.
For productivity.
When I look at the relationship between at home work versus in the office work as it relates to productivity, I have a different perspective than a lot of people because I'm not going to debate, the empirical numbers. I'm going to simply say one thing. Productivity is ultimately in the eyes of the beholder. Who has the power? In the case of the company, if the company is paying your salary, the company is giving you a paycheck, and the company says in order to justify your productivity, you need to be in the office, you have to be in the office.
The fact is that bosses like to have people on the premises. I've spent most of my career as an editor-in-chief, and I liked to have people in the office. And there's something to be said. I totally am very empathetic to the idea of culture and mentorship and creativity and all of those things. But that said, there is a reason why hybrid remote work remains so prevalent, and the reason is that it works.
Okay, so she mentioned creativity, collaboration. I think, again, it depends. So let's say that you work for a startup company. I think if you work for a startup, it makes perfect sense for everyone to be in office because you're getting things off the ground. You're building something from scratch, from nothing to something. So you need to have people together, throwing ideas off each other. And you're such a small nucleus at that time that you need people there to really get it up and going versus, let's say, it's a more established company. Let's say you work for IBM. IBM's been around since what, the 80s, 70s, before, I don't know. It's been around for a long time. Are they still innovating? Sure. But are they anywhere near a startup? No. Now it's so big that, for example, as a startup, you might have someone wearing multiple hats. Someone might be doing marketing and sales and something else. Someone might be doing HR and someone might be doing finance, a bunch of different roles. So there are a few people wearing multiple hats. In that kind of environment, it makes sense to be in person. But if you're some large corporation with a bunch of different divisions and a bunch of different departments and departments within departments, and people have their own individual defined niche roles, there's not so much a need to be in person, I see. Now, hybrid, she mentioned, does seem to work. And I'll be honest, it does seem like a happy medium, but that's not to say that completely remote cannot work.
News reports of companies mandating in-person work have been dominating headlines recently, with studies also highlighting crackdowns on the coffee badging trend. Owl Labs data shows 44% of hybrid employees still coffee badge. That's down 24% from 2023. Meanwhile, 70% of coffee badgers have been caught, with 16% now forced to be in office for the full day. Interestingly, some companies are also using badge data or swipe data as a tool to promote, demote, or even lay off employees.
So I wrote a book called The Algorithm about how AI is used in the workforce, to hire people, but also to monitor employees. And one of the folks that I talked to was an analyst at Gartner. One of the companies he was working with, what they did is they looked at we want to find the people that we haven't really promoted before. How can we do this? So this company came up with this idea to look at batch data. So the people who batched in early and batched out late, who had very long hours at the desk, were supposed to be more promotable than others. The unfortunate thing about that company was also when the pandemic hit and they started to have to do layoffs, they wanted to look at this kind of badging in, badging out data to understand who are the people that leave early, that have the fewest hours in the seats, and they were going to look at those to lay off.
The push by some companies against flexible work is apparent in job postings with fewer remote roles. LinkedIn data shows flexible work stabilizing at 1 in 5 listings since November 2023, down from a peak of over 1 in 4 between October 2022 and March of 2023. Indeed's chart also shows a decline in remote and hybrid job listings since their 2022 peak. As the world reopened post-pandemic, corporate America shifted its stance on remote work. Companies like Amazon now mandate employees to return to the office 5 days a week or risk losing their jobs.
So let's be honest, and let me know what you think in the comment section. I think there are two main things behind this push to return back to the office. One, I think, is that people flat out abused work from home. Let's be honest. Some people abuse the system. There's always going to be those people. They work from home. They take the time to go and do personal stuff on the clock they probably shouldn't do, or they're out too long, taking extended lunches, getting their nails done, getting their hair done, going for jogs, going to the gym, walking their dogs 24 times in a day, taking care of dependents, you name it. And yes, working from home does provide a level of flexibility. That's what's so good about it, as long as you get your work done. And yes, if let's say you're a salaried person and you get paid the same amount no matter how much or when you get your work done, as long as it's done, I get it. Maybe during the day, you take some time to go do something you would otherwise not be able to working in the office. But there are all those people who just flat out abuse the system. So I think that's one. Two, I would say, is that there is a generational thing there. A lot of the people that are making these decisions are older, and they have been in their careers for a lot longer, and they come from a time where working in the office was more what you do. And maybe they're not as amenable or as favorable towards working from home. So I think those are the two major forces that are contributing to this return to office push, more so than productivity. And there's also a perception that you do more work when you're in the office. Now, some people, they work better at home. I work better at home. I know a lot of people do. And some people don't abuse the system. Many don't. However, there's a perception by those managers and higher ups that see you in the office. They know you're working. They know you're not out doing something on the clock that you shouldn't be. So even if you're sitting in your office and let's say you're surfing on the web and you're on Amazon or you're watching Netflix pretending to work, at least they see you in your chair, and that makes them feel comfortable. So let's be honest here. But let me know what you think in the comments about that.
Company's cloud chief, Matt Garman, saying during an all-hands meeting that staffers who don't agree with the policy, well, they can leave. According to the transcript that was viewed by CNBC, he said the following, in quotes, if there are people who just don't work well in that environment and don't want to, that is okay. There are other companies around.
There are a lot of employers, I'm saying small to mid-sized employers, who are waiting on a juggernaut like Amazon to officially go ahead and push forward with a 5-day work policy, because their bank account is basically the size of a small country's economy. And this is just an Amazon attitude, is if you don't like it, go someplace else. Other employers, and I'm hearing this behind closed doors, employers are really happy that Amazon is pushing this, because if Amazon's doing it, now we can follow suit.
I don't think that the 5-day work week is something that you're going to see Generally, it's the fact that Amazon has opted to go that direction doesn't necessarily mean that everybody is going to move in lockstep with what they did.
One of the reasons employers can get more workers back into the office because there just isn't as much mobility as there was a few years ago.
Okay, so there's two things here. There's follow the leader. A lot of companies are seeing this big company like Amazon mandate 5 days in the office. They're like, yes, now we can do it. People can't really fight against it because we have these large companies doing it. But the flip side of that coin is they're going to be able, smaller companies are going to be able to attract high quality talent from these large corporations like Google, Meta, Amazon, Tesla, etc. Because now these people that are looking for more flexible work are going to say, well, I can go to this company here and have hybrid work or even fully remote work instead of staying here where I have to be back into the office 5 days per week and they're paying me just as well. So it's actually it's a double-edged sword, I guess you could say it that way. It's a good thing for those companies that want to follow the leader, and it's a good thing for those companies who want to take talent from these bigger companies that are forcing people back into the office.
You don't see as many workers moving. And in fact, 2 in 5 workers tell us that they feel stuck in their job.
Amazon, who's now mandating all of their employees come back 5 days a week. And employees have been up in arms about that. They don't want that. They want to keep their flexibility. It remains to be seen if this is going to have a huge ripple effect, if other employers are going to mandate the same thing.
CNBC reached out to Amazon regarding its 5-day office work policy. The company stated that the policy was needed to ensure that its team stays connected to invent, collaborate, and deliver the best results for its customers and business. The push against remote work isn't limited to companies. Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, co-leaders of the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, are proposing a 5-day in-office work week for federal employees, raising doubts about the future of flexible work. The push against remote work isn't limited to companies. Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, co-leaders of the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, are proposing a 5-day in-office work week for federal employees, raising doubts about the future of flexible work and the coffee badging trend.
Yeah, when I look at the future of flexible work, here's what I see. Depending on the industry, flexible work might be the thing to be. You know, if you happen to work in a technological industry, you can work remotely. It doesn't necessarily require that you to come in the office versus if you're in a human resources function, if you're a warehouse function, if you're in something director of operations, that's going to force you to continue to come into work because you need to be hands-on. So what we're essentially going to see in the future is going to look a lot like the past.
It's very clear when you look at the data on LinkedIn that employees prefer flexible work. So they're going to be looking for those hybrid options, those remote options, wherever they can get them. And they're going to be looking to make work for them as they did during the pandemic.
I think the coffee badging phenomenon is indicative of the type of adjustments that we're going to see going forward as we see a normalization of the relationship between employees and employers and expectations about whether people will be working at home or whether they'll be working in the office. So I think that it's perhaps a symptom of those types of adjustments as workers kind of seek out what are the appropriate norms with their employers.
Okay, so I think we get the idea. What's next? They're saying it's gonna go back to, well, that guy was saying, which I don't really like his takes, the Greer guy, but he's saying pretty much things are gonna go back to how they were. I disagree with that. I think hybrid is more here to stay. I think hybrid is going to be the new norm. Most companies are probably gonna have some form of, you're in the office 2-3 days a week, you work from home the other time. So I think that's probably where it's going to land more so than not. There will be those companies that allow fully remote work, but very few and far between probably, unless the market switches again and it loosens and now these employers are looking for ways to attract more employees again. That might be a way they do it. And then of course, there are gonna be the companies that want people back into the office full time, probably more of those companies than the ones that are fully remote, but we're gonna have some kind of balance there. Let's say 30% full-time in the office, 50% to 60% hybrid, and the other 10 to 20% will be probably fully remote. With that being said, if you made it this far, I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you feel so inclined to subscribe because it really does help with the YouTube algorithm. And until next time, make smart financial decisions.